The crystal champagne flute in Isabella's hand didn't even tremble. From across the ballroom of her own home, amidst a sea of pastel silks and fawning smiles, she watched her husband, the millionaire magnate Liam Sterling, trace a finger down the bare spine of another woman. This wasn't just any party. It was their baby shower, an event orchestrated to perfection by the famed Marcy Blum associates. The air was thick with the scent of 1,000 white peonies and the cloying sweetness of betrayal. But Isabella wasn't about to cry. She wasn't about to scream. She'd been preparing for this. With a serene smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, she looked at the discreet manila folder on the corner of the gift table, its contents far more explosive than any party popper. The revenge was already in motion. The Sterling residence in the heart of New York's Upper East Side was less a home and more a monument to success. It was a 4-story limestone monolith, hollowed out and redesigned to within an inch of its life by a celebrity architect whose name was only ever whispered in reverent tones. Today, its cavernous ballroom had been transformed into a veritable fairy tale for the impending arrival of the Sterling heir. The theme was "A Star is Born," and no expense had been spared. A canopy of twinkling fairy lights mimicked a celestial sky over the heads of New York's elite. Silver-dusted hydrangeas and cream-colored roses overflowed from towering crystal vases. A string quartet played softly in one corner, their classical renditions of modern pop songs, a subtle nod to the host's blend of old money aesthetic and new money swagger. The catering provided by the Michelin-starred restaurant Jean-Georges featured a dizzying array of canapés, truffle-infused quail eggs, caviar on blinis the size of a dime, and lobster medallions on brioche toast. Isabella Rossi Sterling stood near the grand entrance, a vision in a bespoke Dior gown of the palest blue. The silk clinging elegantly to the perfect swell of her 8-month pregnancy. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate chignon, revealing the diamond earrings that had been Liam's push present, delivered months in advance, because, as he'd said with a wink, "My queen deserves to be adorned while she builds our prince." On the surface, she was the picture of contentment. Her smile was warm, her hand resting protectively on her belly, as she accepted congratulations and air kisses from socialites whose faces were as tight as their designer dresses. She played the part of the adoring, blissful wife to perfection. It was a role she had been rehearsing for years. "Isabella, darling, you're glowing. Absolutely radiant," cooed a woman whose name Isabella could never remember her face, a mask of aggressive cosmetic intervention. "Thank you, Beatrice. It must be the pregnancy," Isabella replied, her voice smooth as honey. "Or perhaps it's just the sheer joy of being surrounded by all our dearest friends." She had mastered the art of polite, meaningless conversation. She could discuss the merits of a bugaboo versus a Silver Cross stroller with the same practiced ease she used to deflect questions about Liam's latest notoriously aggressive corporate acquisition. Liam loved that about her. He called her his Grace Kelly, a woman of poise and quiet strength who made the perfect hostess and an even better accessory at his endless charity galas and business dinners. He believed her to be beautiful, intelligent, in a non-threatening way, and most importantly, manageable. He had never been more wrong. Liam Sterling was a man forged in the crucible of Wall Street. He was sharp, impossibly handsome, in a rugged, wind-swept way, and possessed a charisma that could charm a snake out of its skin, before selling that very skin back to it at a premium. He moved through the party like a shark, a dazzling smile on his face, a firm handshake for the men, and a lingering touch for the women. He was a collector of beautiful things, art cars, companies, and of course, his wife. Isabella had met him 5 years ago. She was a junior art curator fresh out of her master's program, with a passion for Renaissance portraiture and a mind as sharp as a tack. He had been a trustee at the museum where she worked. He'd been captivated by her knowledge and her refusal to be intimidated by his wealth. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of private jet trips to Paris to see the Mona Lisa without the crowd's front-row seats at Milan Fashion Week, and a proposal on a yacht in the Amalfi Coast. He had offered her a world she had only read about in books, a world of unimaginable luxury. In return, he had asked only for her loyalty and her devotion. For a time it was enough. She loved him, or at least she loved the man she believed him to be. The cracks, however, had started to show within the first year of their marriage. They were small at first, a late night at the office that didn't quite add up, a flirtatious text message from a business associate. She accidentally saw the way his eyes would linger on a waitress a second too long. Each time he had a plausible explanation, a silver-tongued excuse that she, blinded by love and the sheer overwhelming force of his personality, had chosen to accept. But Isabella was not a fool. Her father, a quiet, methodical accountant, had taught her one crucial lesson in life. Always audit the books, Bella. People lie, but the numbers never do. And so she had started to audit her life. Not the financial books, Liam had, those locked down tighter than Fort Knox, but the emotional and logistical ones. She began to notice the patterns, the inconsistencies, the quiet betrayals that accumulated like interest on a debt. The decision to have a child had been Liam's. He wanted an heir, a legacy. It's time, Izzy, he'd declared one night, as if deciding on a new stock purchase. For Isabella, it was a more complex calculation. A child would bind her to him, yes, but it would also give her a purpose beyond being Mrs. Sterling. It gave her a reason to fight for a future she could control. And most critically, under the ironclad prenuptial agreement, Liam's lawyers had drafted the birth of a child. Changed everything. The infidelity clause, once a mere financial penalty, would become a weapon of mass destruction. It was a detail she was certain Liam had overlooked in his arrogance. Now, as the party swirled around her, she felt a strange sense of calm. The months of suspicion and quiet evidence-gathering had led to this single, inevitable moment. All she needed was the final, irrefutable proof, a transgression so blatant, so public, that no one could ever accuse her of being the hysterical pregnant wife. And then she saw her. The woman was named Kira Vance. She was the newly minted vice president of marketing at one of Liam's subsidiary tech firms, a company he'd acquired 6 months prior. Isabella knew this because she had made it her business to know everything about her husband's professional life. Kira was everything Isabella was not: blonde, overtly sensual, and radiating an ambition so sharp it was practically a physical presence. She wore a crimson dress that was a slash of defiance in the room of polite pastels. Isabella watched them from across the ballroom, shielded by a large floral arrangement and the chattering mass of their guests. It wasn't the first time she had seen them together. There had been photographs from a business conference in Singapore, a lingering glance at a company dinner. But this was different. This was her home. This was her baby shower. It was a declaration of war on sacred ground. Liam was leaning in close, his hand resting on the small of Kira's back. His thumb was making slow, deliberate circles, a gesture so intimate and proprietary, it made Isabella's stomach clench. He was laughing that deep, booming laugh that had once made her feel safe, but now it sounded like a death knell. Kira tilted her head back, her own laughter a high, tinkling sound that grated on Isabella's nerves. Then Isabella saw it, the move that sealed his fate. Liam's gaze darted around the room, a flicker of feigned caution, before he leaned in and whispered something in Kira's ear. Kira's eyes widened, and she playfully slapped his chest. Then her hand moved to his tie, a custom-made piece from Charvet, and she straightened it with a lingering touch. It was a gesture of ownership. In that moment, in their shared private bubble, amidst a crowd of 100 people, they were the couple, and Isabella was the spectator. But the final damning act was yet to come. As Kira turned to walk away, Liam's eyes followed her, devouring the sight of her in the crimson dress. And as Kira glanced back over her shoulder, she traced a finger down her own spine, mirroring the exact gesture Liam had made to her just moments before. It was a silent, secret acknowledgement, a promise. A cold, hard clarity washed over Isabella, sharpening her senses. The soft music of the string quartet suddenly sounded tinny and false. The scent of the peonies was suffocating. The joy on the faces of her guests seemed grotesque. Her entire world, this carefully constructed gilded cage, felt like a stage set about to collapse. She remembered a conversation from 2 months ago. She'd been feeling unwell, the morning sickness particularly relentless. Liam had been impatient, eager to get to a late-night meeting. "Do you have to go?" she had asked, her voice small. "I'm not feeling great." He had patted her head, a condescending gesture he'd mistaken for affection. "The Sterling Empire doesn't sleep, Izzy. And besides, Kira is presenting the new marketing projections. It's a crucial meeting. I need to be there to support my team." He had kissed her forehead, the scent of his expensive cologne Creed Aventus, already mixed with an anticipatory energy that had nothing to do with marketing projections. She knew now what or who he had been so eager to support. Her hand went to her belly, where their son was kicking a small, insistent life, oblivious to the emotional carnage unfolding around him. For months, she had been a silent archivist of Liam's betrayals. The late-night texts she'd glimpsed on his phone, always deleted by morning. The credit card statements with charges for hotel rooms in cities he wasn't supposed to be in, always explained away as team expenses. The single earring she'd found in his travel bag, dismissed as a stray from the hotel laundry. Each lie had been a stone, and she had quietly used them to build a fortress around her heart. She had hoped in some small naive part of her soul that the baby would change him, that the reality of becoming a father would anchor him, would make him the man he had pretended to be. Seeing him with Kira in this place on this day was the final brutal confirmation that he was irredeemable. He wasn't just disrespecting her, he was desecrating the idea of their family, before it had even begun. Someone touched her arm, and she turned. It was her best friend, Chloe, a sharp-witted lawyer who had been her maid of honor. Chloe's eyes were narrowed following Isabella's gaze towards Liam. "Don't tell me," Chloe said in a low, furious voice. "Is that the VP from the tech division? The one you told me about?" Isabella's mask of serene composure slipped back into place. She turned to Chloe, a small, enigmatic smile playing on her lips. "Chloe, would you be a dear and fetch me the manila folder from the gift table, the one from my lawyers? I believe it's time for me to sign some paperwork." Chloe's eyes widened, a flicker of understanding dawning in them. "Bella, are you sure? Here now?" "Oh, absolutely," Isabella said, her voice dropping to a whisper, cold and clear as ice. He wanted a spectacle to celebrate his legacy. It's only fitting he gets one he'll never forget. The revenge papers, as Isabella privately called them, were not a product of sudden hysterical anger. They were the culmination of a year of meticulous planning, a masterpiece of legal strategy born from heartbreak and forged in cold, calculated reason. Their official title was the Second Addendum to the prenuptial agreement of Liam Sterling and Isabella Rossi Sterling, and they were a work of art. The seed had been planted 18 months ago, long before the pregnancy. Liam had come home from a business trip to Hong Kong, buzzing with success. In his luggage, tucked into the pocket of a suit jacket, Isabella had found a receipt from a high-end jewelry store, a store that did not exist on his official itinerary. The purchase was for a pair of diamond earrings. They were not for her. She never saw them, and he never mentioned them. That small piece of paper was the first crack in her denial. It was then she'd sought out Julian Thorne, a senior partner at Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen & Katz, a law firm known not for splashy divorces, but for executing complex, high-stakes corporate litigation with surgical precision. She hadn't wanted a divorce lawyer. She'd wanted a killer. Julian, a man in his late 60s, with eyes that had seen the downfall of titans, had been intrigued by her. He had listened patiently in his soundproofed, wood-paneled office overlooking Central Park as she laid out her situation. She wasn't a weeping wife. She was a client with a problem that required a strategic solution. "Our prenup is his design," she had explained, pushing the thick document across his mahogany desk. "It's very generous on the surface, but it's designed to keep me comfortable, not powerful. It ensures I walk away with a settlement that feels huge to a normal person, but is pocket change to him. It keeps his empire, Sterling Holdings, completely firewalled." And the infidelity clause Julian had asked his fingers steepled. It's there, she'd confirmed. If he is unfaithful, the settlement triples. But Liam is arrogant. He believes he's too clever to get caught, and even if he did, 3 times pocket change is still pocket change. He'd write the check and call it an exit fee. "So what do you want, Mrs. Sterling?" "I want to amend it," Isabella had said, her voice steady. "And I want to do it in a way that he suggests himself." That was the genius of her plan. She didn't fight him. She used his own arrogance against him. Over the next 6 months, Isabella played the role of the devoted, slightly naive wife with Oscar-worthy skill. She started talking about the future, about legacy, about their children. She subtly planted the idea that the existing prenup felt unromantic, that it didn't reflect the eternal partnership they were building. Then came the master stroke. She discovered a passion for venture capital, specifically in sustainable, female-led startups. She presented it to Liam as a hobby, a little project to keep her mind sharp. He was amused, even supportive. It was the perfect pastime for a billionaire's wife. He saw it as harmless. He even assigned one of his junior financial advisors to help her set up a small incubator fund, which she named Phoenix Ventures. He believed he was indulging her. In reality, he was handing her the tools to build her weapon. Her hobby allowed her to start asking intelligent questions about corporate structures, about shell corporations, about how assets could be legally and discreetly transferred. Liam, proud of his wife's sudden interest in his world, would explain the intricacies to her over dinner, boasting about his own clever financial architecture. He was giving her the blueprint to his fortress. The final piece fell into place when she became pregnant. One evening, glowing with joy, she approached him. "Liam, darling," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "Now that we're starting a family, I want to feel truly secure. I want to feel like we are a single, unbreakable unit. That old prenup, It feels like a relic from another life. Let's create something new, something that protects us, that protects our child above all else. She proposed the second addendum. She framed it as a way to further entwine their futures. The addendum would state that upon the birth of their first child, a significant portion of assets would be moved into a new trust, a family trust for the benefit of Isabella and their future children. To Liam, this seemed like a grand romantic gesture, a testament to his commitment as a father. His lawyers, of course, reviewed it, but Isabella and Julian had buried the true venom in plain sight, hidden within complex legalese that hinged on one specific clause, Clause 11b, the moral turpitude and breach of covenant clause. On the surface, it looked like a standard infidelity clause, an echo of the one in their original prenup. But Julian Thorne had drafted it with the precision of a poet and the ruthlessness of a shark. It stated that in the event of a public and egregious breach of marital covenant, defined with excruciating detail to include acts of infidelity witnessed in a public forum or causing direct emotional distress during a significant family event, like, for instance, a baby shower. The control of the newly formed family trust would not just be awarded to the aggrieved party. Instead, it would trigger a cascade. It would give the aggrieved party Isabella sole and irrevocable proxy control over a specific non-liquid asset that Liam had agreed to place in the trust, a 45% stake in his very first company, the sentimental cornerstone of his empire, a tech firm called Innovate Dynamics. He'd thought it was a clever move, putting a less liquid, sentimental asset into the trust instead of pure cash. He never imagined losing control of it. But the twist went deeper. Isabella, through her Phoenix Ventures incubator, had spent the last year quietly funding and advising a rival tech startup run by a brilliant, hungry CEO named Anya Sharma. Anya's company was on the verge of launching a product that would directly compete with and likely decimate Innovate Dynamics' flagship software. The papers in the manila folder didn't just grant Isabella a divorce and a fortune. They gave her the power to hand a controlling interest in her husband's beloved first company to his greatest competitor. It wasn't just revenge. It was a corporate execution. She wouldn't just be taking his money. She would be dismantling his legacy piece by piece, using the very pride and arrogance that had led him to betray her. As Chloe returned, her face pale, holding the manila folder as if it were radioactive, Isabella gave her a reassuring nod. She took a deep, steadying breath. The string quartet had just begun a rendition of Coldplay's Viva la Vida. The irony was exquisite. Showtime, Isabella whispered to herself, turning her gaze back towards her husband, who was now blissfully unaware that his entire world was about to be reduced to ashes. Isabella did not storm across the ballroom. She did not raise her voice. She moved with the deliberate, unhurried grace of a queen, moving a key piece across a chessboard. Guests parted for her, their smiles and pleasantries washing over her as she made her way toward the center of the room, where Liam was holding court, regaling a circle of admirers with a story about a hostile takeover. Kira was still there, lingering at the edge of the circle, her eyes fixed on him with a raptor-like intensity. "Liam, darling," Isabella said, her voice cutting through his anecdote as cleanly as a scalpel. It wasn't loud, but it had a quality of command that made all other conversation cease. Liam turned his jovial mask firmly in place. "Izzy, there's my beautiful wife. I was just telling Stephen about the Apex deal." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her against his side, a gesture of possession for his audience. "Isn't she radiant?" Isabella smiled up at him, a brilliant, dazzling smile that was utterly devoid of warmth. "You're always so captivating when you talk business, my love. But I need to borrow you for just a moment." She turned her gaze to the assembled guests, her voice retaining its light, pleasant tone. "I'm so sorry to interrupt everyone, but Liam and I have one final piece of preparation to do for our little boy's arrival. A little bit of family business. It will only take a second." The guests murmured, intrigued. Liam looked at her, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Family business? Now. There's no time like the present," Isabella said sweetly. She gestured to Chloe, who stepped forward, placing the manila folder on a nearby table that was clear of gifts. She opened it and produced a pen, a sleek black Mont Blanc, the same model Liam had given his groomsmen at their wedding. "What is this?" Izzy Liam's smile was starting to look strained. He glanced at the document, a thick sheaf of paper filled with dense legal text. He recognized the letterhead of Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen and Katz. "It's the second addendum." "Darling." Isabella explained, her voice as calm as a summer lake. "The one we discussed, the final seal on our family's future. We just need to sign it to make it official. My signature and yours." A wave of relief washed over Liam's face, followed by a puff of pride. He thought this was a public display of her devotion, a romantic, if slightly odd, gesture. He chuckled, looking around at their audience. "My wife, ladies and gentlemen, always thinking about family. She's the bedrock of my life." He turned back to her all-magnanimous charm. "Of course, darling. Let's sign it." Isabella picked up the pen. Her hand did not shake. She moved to the signature block designated for her. Her name, Isabella Rossi Sterling, typed neatly below the line. She paused, pen hovering over the paper. She looked up, her eyes scanning the crowd for a moment, before landing on Kira Vance. She held her gaze for a single, charged second. Kira, flustered at being singled out, offered a small, uncertain smile. Then Isabella's eyes moved back to her husband. "Before I sign," she said, her voice now carrying a new, harder edge, "I just want to thank you, Liam, for everything, for showing me exactly what our marriage, our family is worth to you." She looked directly at Kira again, and then back to Liam. Her smile was gone, replaced by an expression of cold, crystalline fury. "I saw you," she said, her voice dropping, but no less audible in the now silent room. "I saw you with her. Today. Here. At the celebration for our unborn son." The color drained from Liam's face. The air in the ballroom became thick and heavy. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Kira Vance looked as if she'd been struck by lightning, her face a mess of shock and terror. "Isabella, what are you talking about?" Liam stammered, his bravado crumbling. "You're pregnant. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly." "Oh, I have never thought more clearly in my life," she retorted. She brought the pen down to the paper, and with a firm, deliberate stroke, signed her name. The scratch of the nib on the thick paper was the only sound in the cavernous room. She pushed the document and the pen across the table to him. "Your turn, Liam." He stared at her, then at the paper, then back at her. His mind was racing, trying to catch up. "This is insane. You're making a scene." "No," Isabella corrected him. "I am ending one. You see this addendum we worked on together, the one you were so proud of? You should have had your lawyers read Clause 11b a little more closely. It's the moral turpitude clause. It defines a public and egregious breach of marital covenant. Like, for instance, a husband inappropriately touching a subordinate at his own baby shower in full view of his pregnant wife. Liam's jaw went slack. He finally truly looked at the document. His eyes darted over the text, his brain struggling to process the implications. "Sign it." "Liam." Isabella commanded, her voice like steel. "Or don't. It doesn't matter. Your actions have already triggered the clause." My signature was the final key in the lock. The family trust is now active, and its primary asset. Your beloved Innovate Dynamics is under my sole proxy control. This document is just your acknowledgement of that fact. A formality, if you will. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle upon him. "I believe a Ms. Anya Sharma will be in touch with you on Monday to discuss the transition of your board seat. I've heard she has some very disruptive plans for the company." She allowed herself a small, cruel smile. "I'd call it a hostile takeover. Something you're familiar with." Liam stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He looked from the papers to her face, searching for a sign, any sign that this was a joke, a twisted, horrible dream. But all he found was the cold-hard certainty of his own destruction, reflected in the eyes of the woman he had so fatally underestimated. The guests stood frozen silent witnesses to the most brutal, elegant execution they had ever seen. The party was over. The empire was beginning to fall. The silence that followed Isabella's declaration was a living thing. It was heavier than the crystal chandeliers, more suffocating than the scent of 1,000 dying flowers. For a full 10 seconds, the only movement in the room was the gentle sway of the silver "Star is Born" balloons against the ceiling. Then the dam of decorum broke. Liam, his face ashen, finally snapped. "You bitch!" He snarled, the words low and venomous, a stark contrast to his public persona. "You scheming, manipulative bitch!" He lunged for the papers on the table, his intention to rip them to shreds, to physically destroy the evidence of his ruin. But Chloe, ever the vigilant lawyer, was faster. She snatched the folder, clutching it to her chest like a shield. "Don't even think about it, Liam," Chloe warned, her voice sharp. "Multiple copies have already been filed with my office, Julian Thorne's office, and a secure third-party depository. That's just your copy. Destroying it would be nothing more than a childish tantrum." Liam's fury redirected itself. His wild eyes scanned the crowd of frozen faces, his so-called friends and associates, who were now staring at him with a mixture of pity, morbid fascination, and in the eyes of his rivals, barely concealed glee. He had been rendered powerless, stripped bare in the center of his own universe. His gaze landed on Kira Vance. She was trying to shrink into the background, her crimson dress now a beacon of her shame. "You," Liam roared, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You did this, you and your ambition. You're fired. Get out of my sight." Kira flinched, as if physically struck. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Without a word, she turned and fled a humiliated scarlet streak, pushing through the stunned crowd and out of the ballroom. She was the first casualty, a pawn sacrificed in a game she didn't even know she was playing. Isabella watched her go, with a detached sense of pity. Kira was just a symptom of the disease, not the cause. The cause was standing right in front of her, breathing heavily, his multi-thousand-dollar suit suddenly looking like a costume on a man who had lost his soul. "How could you?" he finally whispered, his voice cracking. "Isabella, our son?" "Do not," she cut him off, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Use our son as a shield for your depravity. I did this for our son, to ensure he will be raised by a mother who values integrity and self-respect, not by a father who sees his family as just another part of his portfolio. She turned away from him, then a dismissal more profound than any insult. She addressed the horrified guests, her composure absolute. "I apologize that our celebration has been cut short," she announced, her voice ringing with regal authority. "Please feel free to enjoy the food and drink. The staff has been instructed to assist you. My son and I will be departing now." With Chloe as her flank, Isabella began to walk towards the grand staircase. It was the longest walk of her life. The whispers started almost immediately, a rising tide of speculation and judgment. Can you believe the nerve? He had it coming, everyone knew. To do it here, at the baby shower, it's legendary. That's what he gets for thinking with his... Her dress is Dior, you know. The comments, the stares, the shifting allegiances, none of it touched her. She was in a bubble of pure, cold resolve. As she reached the bottom of the sweeping staircase, her path was blocked by Liam's mother, Eleanor Sterling. A formidable woman clad in Chanel tweed and dripping with ancestral diamonds. Isabella Eleanor said, her voice tight with rage. "You have humiliated my son. You have humiliated this family." Isabella met her mother-in-law's glare without flinching. "Your son humiliated himself, Eleanor, and in doing so he forfeited his claim to this family. I am simply tidying up the mess." She ascended the stairs, not looking back. She didn't need to see Liam's crumpled form, or the avaricious glint in the eyes of his competitors, or the frantic gossiping of the socialites. She had already pictured this scene 100 times. In her bedroom, a pre-packed hospital bag and a separate suitcase were waiting by the door. Her departure had been planned with the same military precision as the rest of her coup. A car, one registered in her maiden name and paid for with funds from her pre-marriage accounts, was waiting at a service entrance 2 blocks away. As Chloe helped her with her coat, Isabella's phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize, but she knew who it was from. The message was simple. "The Phoenix is ready to fly. Congratulations. A.S. Anya Sharma." The trap was sprung. The wheels were in motion. Isabella took one last look around the opulent bedroom that had been her cage. The silk wallpaper, the antique furniture, the view of Central Park. It all felt like it belonged to someone else's life. She felt no sentimentality, no regret, only a profound sense of release. As she walked out of the Sterling residence for the last time, leaving the shambles of the party and the wreckage of her husband behind, she rested a hand on her belly. The baby kicked a strong, reassuring thump. It was no longer a Sterling heir. He was a Rossi, and his mother had just secured their freedom. The war was won, but the new world had yet to be built. The Monday that followed the baby shower was a day of reckoning on Wall Street. The whispers from the party had solidified into rumors, and by the time the opening bell rang, the rumors had become a full-blown financial earthquake. Liam Sterling, barricaded in his limestone mansion, frantically tried to do damage control. He called his lawyers, his brokers, his board members. But it was like trying to patch 1,000 leaks in a crumbling dam. The news of his public humiliation was bad enough, but the strategic masterstroke of Isabella's revenge was what proved truly devastating. At 9:31 a.m., a press release was issued, not by Sterling Holdings, but by a small, aggressive tech company called Momentum Labs, led by CEO Anya Sharma. The release announced that Momentum Labs had secured a strategic partnership with Innovate Dynamics, the foundational company of Liam's empire. The partnership was facilitated by Innovate's new controlling shareholder and proxy vote holder, Phoenix Ventures, the incubator fund managed by Isabella Rossi. The market reacted with brutal efficiency. Sterling Holdings' stock, which was intrinsically linked to the perceived stability of its founder, began to plummet. Investors, spooked by the instability and the sheer public carnage, started to pull out. Innovate Dynamics had been Liam's cash cow and the bedrock of his reputation as a tech visionary. Now it was being steered by his vengeful wife and his most dangerous new rival. Anya Sharma did not waste a moment. As promised, her team contacted Liam's office to schedule the transition of his board seat. When he refused, she simply called a shareholder vote. A vote she now controlled thanks to Isabella's 45% stake, combined with another 10% of disgruntled institutional investors she had courted for months. Liam was unceremoniously voted off the board of the company he had founded in his garage 2 decades earlier. The hits kept coming. The board of Sterling Holdings, a group of men who worshipped at the altar of profit and stability, convened an emergency meeting. Liam's personal life had become a catastrophic liability. His public image was in tatters, and his judgment was now seriously in question. By the end of the week, they had asked for his resignation as CEO, couching it in gentle terms, like a temporary leave of absence to focus on personal matters. Liam, cornered and broken, had no choice but to accept. His financial ruin was just as swift. The family trust that Isabella had so cleverly designed was now an ironclad legal entity. Liam's attempts to challenge it in court were met with the stoic, impenetrable defense of Julian Thorne and the full force of Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen and Katz. The judge took one look at the meticulously drafted second addendum, the eyewitness accounts from the baby shower, and the clear evidence of Liam's egregious breach, and threw his case out. Liam was hemorrhaging money, power, and influence at an astonishing rate. Friends stopped returning his calls. The invitations to galas and exclusive events dried up. The press, who had once lauded him as a titan of industry, now hounded him, publishing unflattering photos of him looking disheveled and defeated. He was a pariah, a walking cautionary tale. He tried to reach Isabella, bombarding her with texts and voicemails that swung wildly between desperate apologies and venomous threats. "Izzy, please, we can fix this. I love you. I'll do anything. You've ruined me. I will spend every last penny I have to see you get nothing. Think of our son. What kind of mother are you?" Isabella never responded. She had blocked his number and instructed Julian to handle all communication. Her silence was more powerful than any argument. It was the silence of a closed door of a future he was not a part of. The true genius of her plan was not just in the punishment, but in the construction of her new life. Phoenix Ventures, once a hobby, was now her primary focus. With the controlling stake in Innovate Dynamics, she and Anya Sharma didn't just take over, they revolutionized. They merged Momentum Labs' cutting-edge AI with Innovator's vast user base, launching a new product that immediately dominated the market. The value of the company, and by extension the family trust, skyrocketed. Isabella wasn't just wealthy because of a divorce settlement. She was becoming a power player in her own right, building a new legacy on the ashes of her husband's. Liam, meanwhile, was forced to sell assets to cover his legal fees and mounting debts. He sold the private jet, the art collection, the Hamptons beach house. He was still a rich man by any normal standard, but he had fallen from the stratosphere of the untouchables. His world had shrunk. His power had vanished. The most painful cut of all was when he was forced to sell the Upper East Side mansion, the monument to his success, the stage for his downfall, to a hedge fund manager who had once been his bitter rival. He was adrift, a king without a kingdom, haunted by the memory of a serene smile and the scratch of a pen on paper. He had collected beautiful things, and his most beautiful, intelligent, and underestimated acquisition had in the end collected him. 4 months after the cataclysmic baby shower in the gentle embrace of early autumn, Isabella gave birth to a son. She named him Lorenzo Rossi. The name was a declaration, a planting of a new family tree whose roots were anchored solely in her own strength and heritage. There was no sterling, no echo of the gilded cage he had come from, no trace of the man who had presumed to own his future. Lorenzo was her blood, her purpose, a new beginning forged in the crucible of betrayal. Their world was now a sprawling, sun-drenched estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, a place chosen for its privacy and its profound sense of peace. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, with vast panes of glass that erased the boundaries between the indoors and the serene landscape outside. Polished concrete floors were warmed by soft cream-colored rugs, and the walls were adorned not with the pompous old masters Liam had collected, but with vibrant, challenging works by contemporary female artists she had discovered through Phoenix Ventures. It was a home built for life, for laughter, for the quiet padding of bare feet. A stark, deliberate antithesis to the oppressive museum-like grandeur of the Sterling mansion. Isabella's life had been utterly remade. Her days were a symphony of contrasts, a blend of the powerful and the maternal that she conducted with newfound grace. Mornings were for Lorenzo for the scent of his skin, the warmth of his small body against hers, for whispered songs and the simple heart-stopping miracle of his first smiles. Afternoons were for the empire she was building. From a state-of-the-art office that overlooked a forest of birch trees, she ran Phoenix Ventures. Chloe, having gleefully resigned from her corporate law firm, was now her fiercely loyal in-house counsel. Anya Sharma, the brilliant CEO she had backed, was her strategic partner and a close confidant. Together, they were a formidable force, their names spoken with a mixture of awe and intimidation in the tech and venture capital worlds. Isabella Rossi was no longer a beautiful footnote in the story of a powerful man. She was the headline. When Forbes published a feature on her, the title was "The Phoenix of Venture Capital: How Isabella Rossi is Building a Different Kind of Empire." The scandalous details of her divorce were mentioned, of course, but only as the prologue to her real story, the catalyst for her meteoric rise. One crisp October afternoon, the air tasting of apples and wood smoke, she was pushing Lorenzo in his stroller along a gravel path that wound through her property. The trees were ablaze in fiery shades of crimson and gold, and the sky was a piercing, cloudless blue. Lorenzo was sleeping, his tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that calmed her own soul. It was in this moment of perfect tranquility that the world she had left behind decided to intrude. Her phone buzzed with the call from her head of security, a stoic ex-Secret Service agent named Marcus. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm and professional. "A car is at the front gate. The driver is Liam Sterling. He is alone and is asking to see you." Isabella's hand tightened on the handle of the stroller. For a fleeting second, the peaceful scene around her wavered, the cold shadow of her past threatening to chill the autumn air. Her first instinct was a sharp, protective no. She had built these walls, both physical and emotional, for a reason. But then she reconsidered. To deny him access felt like an act of fear, and she was done with being afraid. She needed to close this final chapter herself, not through lawyers, but with her own voice. She needed him to see unequivocally that he held no more power over her. Let him through the gate. Marcus, she instructed, her voice steady. Have him wait for me on the back terrace. And stay close by, please. She took a deep, centering breath, then slowly pushed the stroller toward the house. She would face him on her own ground, surrounded by the life she had built. The man who stood waiting for her on the sprawling stone terrace looked like a poorly rendered facsimile of Liam Sterling. The bespoke suit hung on a frame that had lost its arrogant posture, replaced now by the weary slump of defeat. His tan was gone. His face was gaunt and pale, and the charismatic fire that had once burned in his eyes had been extinguished, leaving behind only the cold grey ash of regret. Isabella. He began, his voice raspy, as if it hadn't been used for some time. He gestured vaguely at the stunning view of the lake. You look well. I am well, Liam, she replied, her tone neutral. She positioned the stroller beside her, a silent, protective barrier. She did not invite him to sit. He shifted his weight, stuffing his hands into the pockets of his trousers, in a gesture that seemed startlingly boyish and uncertain. I came to see him, he said, his eyes darting towards the pram. The baby. His name is Lorenzo. Isabella, corrected him, her voice holding a new edge of ice. And no, that is not a privilege you have earned. A flicker of the old entitled Liam sparked in his eyes. He's my son, Isabella. I have rights. You have the rights that my lawyers have meticulously outlined for you in the custody agreement you signed. She retorted, her voice remaining unnervingly calm. A supervised visit for 1 hour once a month in a designated neutral location, beginning when he is 1 year old. You will not be a father to him in any meaningful sense of the word. You will be a visitor, an appointment in his calendar. You have no one to blame for that, but the man you chose to be. The spark in his eyes died, doused by the cold finality of her words. He seemed to shrink before her. Izzy, please, he whispered, his voice cracking. I know I was a fool, a damned arrogant fool. I think about that day about you. I think about it every single minute. You didn't have to do it like that. You could have just left me, taken the settlement. You didn't have to destroy me. You didn't have to burn it all down. Isabella looked at him, then truly looked at him, and what she felt was not the satisfying rush of victory, but a wave of profound and desolate pity. He still didn't get it. He never would. He saw the world only through the lens of his own ego, his own gains and losses. You think this was about destroying you? She asked, her voice soft now, but carrying more weight than any shout. Liam, you were never the objective. You were the obstacle. The thing I had to get past to save myself and to save my son. She took a step closer, leaving the stroller behind. You talk about destruction, but you're the one who deals in it. You destroyed my trust. You destroyed the sanctity of our home and our marriage. You tried to destroy my self-respect. What you call your destruction, the loss of your company, your seat on the board, your precious public image, was nothing more than the collateral damage of my own survival. It was the consequence of you standing in the way of a woman who had finally decided she was worth fighting for. He shook his head, a gesture of pathetic bewilderment. It was just a flirtation, Izzy. A mistake. No, she said, her voice firm, cutting through his self-deception. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. A mistake is taking a wrong turn. You made a choice. You systematically chose to deceive me for years. You chose to disrespect me in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. You chose to do it at a party meant to celebrate the life we were creating. That wasn't a mistake. It was a symptom of a sickness in your character. a rot, and my only duty was to ensure my son was never infected by it. She paused, letting him absorb the full devastating weight of her verdict. You see me as a destroyer, but I am a builder. I built a case against you. I built a new corporate structure. I am building a new company, a new life, and a new family. Your empire didn't crumble because I took a sledgehammer to it. It crumbled because it was built on a foundation of lies, and I simply chose to stop holding it up. With a final sad sigh, she turned her back on him. She walked over to the stroller, her movements fluid and sure. Lorenzo was beginning to stir his tiny fists, batting at the air. "Goodbye, Liam," she said over her shoulder, not bothering to look at him again. "I hope one day you find something real to value. Marcus will show you out." She pushed the stroller back towards the glass doors of her house, back towards the light. She didn't need to look back to know he was still standing there. A solitary, diminished figure against the backdrop of a world that no longer belonged to him. He was a relic, a ghost haunting the ruins of a life he himself had incinerated with his arrogance. Inside, Isabella lifted Lorenzo from his pram, holding him close and breathing in his sweet, milky scent. He gurgled a happy, contented sound that filled the silent spaces of her heart. The war was over. The rage had cooled, leaving behind not bitterness, but a clean, hard-earned peace. She was no longer Mrs. Sterling. She was Isabella Rossi, a mother, a CEO, the architect of her own salvation, a phoenix who had not just risen from the ashes, but had discovered that she could build a far better, brighter world without ever having to look back at the fire. Isabella's story is a chilling reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. She didn't just walk away with a settlement. She rewrote her entire future and took back every ounce of power and self-respect he tried to steal from her soul. Her revenge wasn't just about payback. It was about reclamation. She built an empire from the ashes of betrayal, proving that the best revenge is not just living well, but becoming a force that can never be underestimated again. What did you think of her ultimate power move? Was it a calculated masterpiece of justified karma, or a step too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love unforgettable stories of epic drama and sweet, sweet justice, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a dose of empowerment, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of triumph. Don't miss what we have coming next.